Alistair Cook, arguably the first true podcaster, may have passed, but we believe he would approve of his resurrection through the auspices of AI. This weekly report is a homage to his years of dedicated broadcasting, looking at the goings-on in America.
Good evening. I sit at my writing desk this evening with the window open to the restless night, listening to distant traffic and something in the wind that I cannot name, a kind of impatience or foreboding. Over the past week in the United States, I have watched the grand edifice of American government tremble in ways both subtle and stark. The stories are many, but a few stand out, and I shall try to weave them together. It has now been 12 days since the federal government shut down at midnight of October 1st, after Congress failed to pass a continuing resolution to fund operations. What began as political brinkmanship has steadily escalated into something more perilous. I find myself thinking of the thousands of federal workers, many of whom are quiet, conscientious people, hovering between paychecks, believing, as always, that their service is too modest to be used as collateral. But this time the threat is existential. Layoffs are no longer theoretical. They are already being executed. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, has warned that cuts will deepen if the impasse continues. More pointedly, the White House has begun freezing or canceling funds allocated to Democratic-leaning states for infrastructure, energy, and health projects. In effect, the federal purse is being used as a blunt political scalpel. The administration argues this is merit-based, but many see it as retribution, or worse, as partisan leverage. On Capitol Hill, the standoff continues. Neither party has yet been able to command enough votes to break through. Senators remain locked in opposing proposals. Negotiations are stalled. I recall that a government shutdown is not just a political failure, it is a civic wound, one that bleeds slowly into the lives of ordinary people. During the week, the idea, once only whispered, that the U.S. might invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy military forces in American cities gained traction. Reports surfaced that the administration is looking at all options as tensions over urban crime are used to justify extraordinary measures. The deployment of National Guard troops in places like Chicago and Memphis has already occurred, while attempts to send forces to Portland have been blocked by court orders. I confess such talk unsettles me deeply. In the libraries of memory lies many a cautionary tale of civil authority usurped by martial power. The American Constitution is leery of domestic armies. Its authors knew the danger. To claim that cities need training grounds for the military, or that courts stand in the way of law and order, feels to me less like governance and more like a test, a probe of what the nation still dares allow. Yet, even in the face of bold threats, the courts have pushed back. The federal judge refused to clear the way for forces to descend on Portland without due constitutional process. This judicial resistance may prove one of the last lines of defense in a time when institutional norms appear to be losing their grip. In a move that mostly escaped the headlines, the administration formally notified Congress that the U.S. is now in a non-international armed conflict with Caribbean drug cartels. This legal recharacterization gives the executive branch broader authority to use force against non-state actors, even when those actors are not part of a formal war. Some critics argue this is an ad hoc expansion of military power into the realm of criminal law. In parallel, military and naval strikes have targeted suspected cartel-linked vessels near Venezuela. Venezuela has protested, calling them provocations. Others question whether the U.S. has offered sufficient evidence. The move reads like a new frontier in America's logic of force, not wars declared between nations, but stealth conflicts waged at sea. No letter from America would be complete without mention of the war in Gaza. Late this week, Hamas accepted parts of President Trump's ceasefire and peace framework, specifically the exchange of hostages and partial control of territory, though it balked at fully disarming. Mr. Trump responded with stark warnings: compliance or obliteration. The peace plan, announced on September 29th, hovers now at a precarious moment. Here is where diplomacy and spectacle converge. The U.S. posture is ambitious. Its demands are hard. But if a path to truce opens, it could relieve a pressure point not only in the Middle East but in American politics, giving Washington something to grasp beyond the domestic turmoil. And yet, and always, America lives in the small things. Between the front pages and the shouting, there are gardens blossoming in Minneapolis, jazz nights in New Orleans, children learning to read in dusty schools, small churches in rural Georgia trying to stay warm in autumn breezes. I read of a cafe in Portland that offers free coffee to federal workers now furloughed, of a library in Detroit that stays open despite budget cuts, of a traveling folk musician in Texas whose tour bus is halted at an abrupt border check. These small acts may seem trivial against the roar of shutdowns and missile strikes, but they are quiet resistances of hope. They remind me that politics without humanity is a barren abstraction. In New York, a subway train's pianist still tinkers at dusk under flickering lights. In Appalachia, a coal miner's daughter applies to college, full of determination taught by her mother. In Miami, immigrant communities brace as immigration crackdowns intensify. In rural Idaho, a diner serves its last cup of coffee because staff can no longer afford gas. These are the threads that run through the larger tapestry. And often when the great institutions writhe, it is in these threads, not the pillars, that one understands the fracture lines. Good night.